now it's time for another Board Game Brawl Top 10 with Nick Meanahan, sponsored by BoardGameBliss.com.
Hey peoples, it is now time for something completely different. Okay, not really. A little bit different. We're still going to do a top 10 list, but this is actually going to be two top 5s together. It is going to be my top 5 worst and top 5 best game mechanisms. And yes, there is some debate over whether it's mechanics or mechanisms. I like using mechanisms. Hash it out in the comments. And if you want to skip my entire intro or the rest of the intro, you can actually click on the link at the bottom of your screen as well as down in the description section of the video. That'll take you right to the beginning of the first top 5, which will be the top 5 worst. We'll get those out of the way so we don't leave you with a bad aftertaste and go over what I think are the best ones last. Now, first and foremost, for people who are still watching the intro, I want to clarify that this is very specific mechanisms, not broad categories, meaning that cooperative games was not in the running for my top 5 best, because cooperative is like a whole genre. Within the whole, or genre or subgenre, whatever you want to call it, but within that, it could be anything. I've played cooperative games that felt like Euro games, like Atlantis Rising. I played cooperative games that are storytelling games and cooperative games that are just something else completely different. Taking an existing game and making it into a cooperative game. So there's just too many things for that kind of a broad category. So instead, I focus on very small, detailed elements of games that I like and that I really, really don't like. And this is open to a lot of interpretation. I probably forgot some things. I didn't want to make a whole top 10 list for both things. I just felt, my phone went off. That's completely unprofessional. But I didn't want to go over, do a whole top 10 list for both things because I didn't know that I'd have enough to really flesh out a list for each of those. And I only wanted to hit on the ones that are really aggravating to me and ones that I really, really gravitated towards. So for the top 5 worst, it's ones that, while not necessarily a deal breaker, in fact, in some of the instances, and I will mention them, there are some games that have these mechanisms that I still do like because the sum of the parts is still greater than that one individual part. But in some games, it is a total deal breaker. Whereas if you go to my favorite mechanisms, kind of the reverse. Not every game that has those mechanisms is the greatest end-all be-all. But if a game has one of my top 5 favorite mechanisms, it's more likely, first off, that I'll even give it a chance and play it, but more likely I'll also end up liking it or even loving it. So, that's basically it. I would love to hear what you guys think. What are your least favorite? What are your most favorite? Please tell me about them down in the comments. What did I miss? I'm sure I missed some that I would have loved to have put on the list, but that's just the way it goes. This is just for fun anyways. So without further ado, let's start off with the top 5 worst game mechanisms. My number 5 worst game mechanism is roll and move, or rolling and moving. And I believe that, or I would wager that for a lot of people, this is their number 1 worst mechanism, the one they hate the most. Because it is, and I would say that this entry on my list sort of encompasses all of the bad traits of games from yesteryear. The games that we unfortunately grew up on that are still around today. Of course, Monopoly is the number 1 example of this. Any kind of licensed game, the kind of games that they force themselves to play on Flip the Table, the excellent podcast, those are the types of games that are more likely to have this mechanism. And it was a cheap, easy cop-out just to have people, quote, play a game. In the loosest sense of the word. At least Monopoly had a little something extra. Most of the games from back in the day that had a roll and move mechanism was just roll dice, move here, draw a card, boom, done. Do whatever the card tells you to do. Especially when roll and move involves exact movement to get to a finishing space. Terrible. I think Trouble had that to some degree. I'm kind of trying to remember with the Pop-O-Matic machine, which was still just rolling and moving, essentially. So it's an awful mechanism. While at the same time, the reason why it's not higher up on the list is that a few games that I play that I like have it, and it doesn't kill the game for me. Shadowhunters is a good example of that, although that's a weird game in and of itself. Magical Athlete, the entire game is rolling and moving, and I can't say that Magical Athlete is a good game, but it's silly and stupid and frivolous enough to be fun, and it definitely is a roll and move game. So there are some exceptions, but for the most part, This is one that I'm glad most modern, hardcore board gaming enthusiasts, designers, and publishers have decided to completely throw away and do away with. But of course, you still go into big box stores and see Monopoly sitting there, so it's never going to go away completely. That is my number 5 worst game mechanism, roll and move. My number 4 is player elimination. Now, there are a few games where player elimination isn't that big of a deal because the game tends to be fast enough that when people start to die and get knocked out of the game, it doesn't last that much longer anyways, like King of Tokyo. But there are other games that when you're eliminated from the game and you are just literally sitting there waiting and waiting and waiting. Now, some people would disagree with me on this, but I would say that Werewolf is a great example of this, especially when it's a game with a ton of people and ton of discussion going on. But there's also a lot of moderate to heavyweight board games where you can be de facto eliminated, where you can just be like, oh, I'm not going to win this game. And I know that I'm not. Or maybe you are just out and out eliminated in like a heavy war game or something like that. And in fact, I think that's one of the problems I had with was that City of Remnants from Plaid Hat Games, where you may not be eliminated, but you are effectively out. So I would say that this entry covers that spectrum of de facto elimination and out-and-out elimination. No matter how you want to cut it, it's just a bad mechanism. Another game I played recently called Escape from the Aliens in Outer Space had that as well, where you can just die, and then you're just sitting there doing nothing for a very long time. It's just not a good thing. It's another cheap cop-out. Games that go out of their way to at least have you do something while you are eliminated makes it interesting. Like in the game Legendary Encounters Alien, you could be afflicted with a chest burster per the movie and die, but then you come back as an alien player hunting the other players, and 9 times out of 10 when that happens, everyone's going to lose, except for you, the alien. But that was a really cool twist on that, but not every game goes that extra mile to do something like that, but they really should. Player elimination in some senses can't be avoided, but there's ways to sort of massage it, make it better, but most games just haven't learned that lesson. So when I find out that player elimination is in a game, I am very, very hesitant about it, and it really has to knock my socks off, or whatever that expression is, to make me like it at that point. So that is my number 4 worst game mechanism, player elimination. My number 3 worst mechanism is pick up and deliver. This is going to be sacrilege to a lot of people, I know. But I would also say, much as the same way that I had my number 5, roll and move, sort of encapsulate everything I hate about ancient, older, mass market board games, pick up and deliver encapsulates what I hate about a lot of different Euro games and Euro-style games, just sort of any kind of economic game. I can't even think of any pick up and deliver games that I really enjoyed, but I can certainly think of ones that I hated, like Valdora. Merchant of Venus is awful. I haven't played the original edition, but I played the newest edition with the old edition rules and with the new edition rules, and it was terrible in both ways. Like, I'm going to go pick up this thing, and then slowly wind my way back to the beginning. The entire mechanism just seems like an awful chore. It's designed to be a chore. That's what you're doing, okay? People who have a delivery job during the day would tell you they probably don't want to play a game based on it, or maybe they do. I don't know. Maybe they're obsessed with it. But for me, it always feels like work. It just feels like... I don't want to say it's a lazy way around doing something more fun, but certainly there's got to be a better way to represent you doing well in business than just picking something up and dropping it off somewhere else. At some point, that probably seemed very innovative, like, yeah, that's how you make money in real life. You have to transport goods, but I would much rather that be abstracted away and get to a much better game mechanism. So pick up and deliver has always been a dull slog for me, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. That is my number 3. My number 2 is blind bidding. Now, I don't like auctions in general. I think you can kind of mix these up. They're kind of tangential to each other. But I can tolerate auctions in some games, right? But blind bidding, where everyone is taking a certain amount of something, whether it's gold or power or influence, whatever it might be, and then simultaneously revealing. I just hate that in general, but especially when it punishes you by you losing all of your currency. Now, I'm not going to say that there's not strategy involved here. Of course, people who are really good at reading the crowd, reading the other players, that looking at what everyone has, and sort of making an educated guesstimate as to what they should bid at that point, If you're really good at that, congratulations, okay? I'm not, and I think that the punishment for failing in one of those bids is just too severe. And I'll give you two good examples of that. One where it really doesn't work out, and one where I'm like, I wish it wasn't in there. The one that really kills the game for me is Game of Thrones, the board game. Now, Game of Thrones, the board game is incredibly thematic, so many cool things going on in that game, and I love most of it, but the blind bidding, which is incredibly essential to the game, where you are bidding power in order to take one of the different seats of power in the kingdom, like the Master of Ravens or the Iron Throne, that kind of stuff. It's so incredibly crucial and essential that you get control of it at certain points in the game of certain things. But if you fail in that bidding of power, it is crippling. It is crippling, not just having to not get one of those things that you're bidding on, but also having to give up the power that took so long to build up in some cases. Again, I know if you're more strategic, if you thought well out in advance, you can get over that. But it is so punishing, I think, especially to people who aren't adept at that type of stuff, that it just kills the fun. There's another game that I have and that I really love called Ristorante Italia. And while that aspect of the game, the blind bidding, doesn't kill the game for me, it almost does. But at least in that instance, you only lose like half of your money, if I remember correctly. It's been a while. So there's ways to make it not as punishing, but in most cases, in every case I can recall, it's just been a bad, lazy mechanism, and one I really don't like at all. That is my number 2 worst game mechanism, blind bidding. Alright, well, my number 1 worst game mechanism, if I'm at the point now, if I see it in a game, I'm just not going to play. It would have to come so highly recommended by so many of my fans, other reviewers I respect. Only then would I even bother to touch it at this point. That game mechanism is deck building. No, it's storytelling. I hate storytelling games. Now, let me be very clear what I mean by that. You can say that certain games are in the storytelling genre, sort of. Like Dixit, where you're kind of making a story by giving a clue with your card. And the players can kind of communally make a story with the clues that they give with different artwork, right? Or Spyfall, where you have to come up with a lie or a question, and you're sort of building a narrative, sort of. I don't consider those storytelling games in this sense. That's just got a little bit of it sprinkled in there, enough for me, right? What I consider storytelling, the most egregious example of this is Story War, which people who know my channel know I hate that game. Hate it with the passion of 1,000 suns, or the burning fire of 1,000 suns, whatever. But other examples where it's not as egregious, but I still ended up hating the game because of it. Once Upon a Time. I know a lot of people like that game, and I could get on board with it because at least that game had some mechanisms involved, some actual things that you were trying to do and get accomplished, getting cards out of your hand. But it still involves you making up nonsense for no reason. That's what I dislike completely. There's not enough structure. I mean, you could say, oh, Dick, you're just supposed to be having fun. Okay, yeah, we're just supposed to be having fun. So why don't we just run around the yard playing cops and robbers, if that's all we're trying to do? These are games. There's supposed to be some structure involved, some rules. Even role-playing games have systems. You're supposed to go outside the boundaries of those systems in order to make sure the game continues to be fun, but without any kind of rules or strictures, it's not a game anymore. And that's what these games are. They're devolving into chaotic nonsense. Story War is the worst example, but another example, Winter Tales. Most people don't even remember this game exists at this point from a couple of years ago. But Winter Tales had the potential to be great because some of the systems were really good, but it all ended up being, if I could tell enough bullshit to make the other players buy it, then I can just do whatever I want, basically. And that killed it. Even though the potential was there to be great. And any time that mechanism slips into a game, I just can't stand it. So many games on Kickstarter seem to be relying on this, and when I see it, my eyes glaze over and I move on to the next project. It's such a... When I talk about lazy mechanisms, that's why that's my number 1. It's the most lazy cop-out thing to do. Make a story! Make something up! If you can say it, you can do it! No. There has to be rules and restrictions. So, storytelling mechanisms, worst possible game mechanism I could think of, and probably my number 1 forever of the worst. That's that. But that's why I saved the best, literally, for last. So let's get on to my best and most favorite mechanisms where I can be significantly more positive. So on to the good stuff. My number 5 best game mechanism is worker placement. It's very simple, it's very straightforward, very to the point, not a lot of ambiguity with worker placement. Some of my favorite games have it. It's like Lords of Waterdeep, Euphoria, Viticulture, games like Quadropolis, to a degree, a little known game called Archon, Glory and Machination, I think is the subtitle on that one. Just a lot of games I really enjoy have worker placement. And like I said, it is very simple. You just you take a piece, you put it in a piece, you do a thing. Okay? Could be getting a resource, could be just taking a special action, getting a card, whatever the case might be. But I think that the worker placement is always best when it goes to like its extremes, right? Or Manhattan Project is another good example of this, and where it's not only that you are putting a piece somewhere and getting a thing, but you're potentially blocking other people from getting it. Some worker placement games let you kick someone out from a space. There's really interesting ones where you have a ton of different pieces, and how many pieces you put out determine how well you can do at a thing. Like the Ars Alchemia game, another very little known worker placement game. So when they take that simple idea and then twist it around and do weird and wonky things with it, it's even more interesting because you're starting off from a strong foundation, a very simple and to-the-point mechanism that can expand out from there and just make it even more interesting. Sometimes you don't even remember that you're doing a worker placement game because everything else in the game is running so smoothly. A game like Euphoria is a very good example of that. So worker placement has become sort of ubiquitous at this point, but I think that's for a reason because it is a good, solid foundation-style mechanism, and my number 5 best. My number 4 best, favorite, however you want to say it, mechanism, maybe I should put some more thought into the title, best mechanism is cards that have multiple uses. Now, there's probably a better, more eloquent way to say that, and if someone has a over-encompassing 1 or 2 word title for it, please let me know down in the comments. But what I mean by that, I'll tell you examples to give you an indication of what I mean. The best example for me personally is Imperial Settlers. It's a top 10 game for me, and it's a fantastic game where you can use the cards in the game either as buildings, or you can make them into favors that will give you more resources and different types of resources as time goes on. It might be raised, in which case it becomes a foundation, which you can use to sacrifice to make another better, potentially, building. You can use them to discard and use them to raise other people's buildings. You can just use the cards for multiple things. The games of Karl Chudik also use this a lot, Glory to Rome being the most famous of those, but also Motanai or Matanai had that kind of mechanism. And what's the other one? Uchronia. Another one of my favorite games, Elysium, has a little bit of that, where games might be cards might be peasants, or they might be powerful the god cards that you put into the Elysium part of your board, things like that. Anytime that you have multiple options to use one card for, I just really, really enjoy that. Because it shows that the game is thinking outside the box and giving you a lot of versatility and different paths and strategies as to how you want to proceed, and it's a lot of fun. And one of the reasons I didn't like a game that did that, Back to the Future Adventure Through Time, is because it had that mechanism in spades. It was like, oh, great. But it was restricting you and what you could do with those multiple options. You always felt constrained. When a game like Imperial Settlers does it, and does it well, it gives you freedom. You can go in all kinds of different directions. Yeah, maybe one's going to work out better, but it's going to be better for your strategy. Someone else can do something completely different, and it works very well for them because of other factors like special powers. But the point is, you have the freedom to do what you want. I love that in a game. So, my number 4, easily multiple use cards, one of my favorite game mechanisms. My number 3 best favorite game mechanism, however you want to say it, is hidden roles. Now, hidden roles can mean a lot of different things. It could just mean your character is hidden and you have a special power the other players can't see, and that's cool in and of itself. But I really love it when characters have different alignments, different teams that they have to play on, different goals than the other players. Of course, there's tons of examples of this now because it is a hot genre, or at least a hot mechanism. Oh, see, look, I'm mixing things together. But it's a hot mechanism in different genres of games over the past few years. The best examples, at least for me personally, are games like The Resistance Avalon. There's I don't like the original Werewolf, but Ultimate Werewolf Inquisition is great. Of course, Dead of Winter is amazing, where everyone has a hidden. You can see their characters, but their hidden goal and also they're a betrayer as well, which comes in part with their goals. So really, I guess when I say hidden role, I can mean anything that you're hiding from the other players that is your way and your path to victory, which might be you all on your own, or it might be with the other players. And that in and of itself is interesting as well. It just leads to a lot of intrigue in the game. The game itself might be solid and have solid mechanisms, but adding that different layer onto it. Battlestar Galactica, another great example, where you're all working together nominally, but someone is probably definitely going to try and betray you at some point. I love having a solid game and adding that extra intrigue and thematic element on top of it. So much tension, so much fun. I love it. I understand why some people would hate it because of that tension and stress, but for me, I just eat it up, especially when it's on a good, solid game. And most of my favorite games have both of those elements together with it. So that is my number 3 best favorite game mechanism, hidden roles or hidden goals. My number 2 best game mechanism is perhaps the broadest in scope of the mechanisms I've been talking about for both the worst and the best, but I have a very specific thing in mind when I say it, and that is thematic choices. Now, the 2 best examples of this that I have, and they're very recent, are Kingdom Death Monster and Time Stories, where both these games are just dripping with theme all over the place, just like oozing and pussing, and I'm sorry, I'm just trying to make up as many gross analogies as I possibly can, but you have, throughout the course of the game, lots and lots of decisions to make, and it's not just, do I do A or B? I mean, it is, technically, but it's more like, do I enter the tomb or do I train the younglings? I always say like saying younglings. Do I train the younglings to fight, or do I train them in peace? And it's not just enough for me to have a choice to make. It has to be a choice with significant consequences. And those 2 games, Time Stories and Kingdom Death Monster, especially Kingdom Death, have significant consequences to the choice that you make that have ramifications that build upon each other. To a lesser extent, I would say that any game that has a significant tech tree that influences the build of like your civilization or whatnot also interests me. I know that they're very different in some ways, but they're also the same in some ways, because you make a significant set choice, and that determines how the rest of the game is going to go for you. And when it's not just this like very dry, like, I've decided I will specialize in carts, so now I can make more hay for the rest of the game. But if it's very significant, like, I've decided my civilization is now incredibly warlike, and from now on, we are going to fight with everyone, and we are going to be the reavers of the coast and destroy. We do not sow. If it's that kind of choice, that is significant. So anytime that the game gives you a meaningful decision to make that has serious ramifications, for better or for worse, for the rest of the game, I love that. Because to me, that's almost the perfect marriage of mechanisms together with theme. And I'd love to hear other examples of that if you guys are on the same page with me on that one. I gave a lot of thought to that, and I just love the idea of it. So but it's still just my number 2. So my number 2 game mechanism, thematic choices. Okay, if you were betting on my number 1, you'd make even money, because most of you already know what it is. I wish I could keep you in more suspense, but of course, it's deck building. I can't really explain it. Part of it has got to be bias, where this is one of the very first types of things that I learned. Dominion was one of the first games that I played. Also Ascension that I really got into. But also I come from a background of playing a lot of Magic the Gathering and other CCGs like Yu-Gi-Oh! And Rage, the old Werewolf the Apocalypse card game, where it was like traditional old school deck building, where you're building a deck ahead of time. But what appealed to me about deck building, the game mechanism for modern board games and card games, is that you can have that fun of building up a deck and seeing how it works, but doing it on the fly. Everyone starts off from the same point, and within the same compressed time period of an hour or two, you are all trying to build up a deck quickly, get combos going, and see how they play out right away. And I love that feeling. And when you can take the deck building mechanism and make it into crazy thematic games, that's what's even better about it. So if you had asked me maybe a couple of years ago if deck building was my favorite mechanism, I would say, yeah, I like it, but it's probably not that great. But I have seen it used so well in the past couple of years by a few very specific games that I've really come to love it. Of course, the first one that comes to mind is Marvel Legendary, a deck building game, because there's so much content, and the way that you use it is so innovative. Not just that you're fighting a mastermind, getting heroes, fighting villains, but the schemes that they've introduced in that game since the beginning up until now just break the game in so many interesting ways, like time traveling and the helicarrier blowing up and things like that. I can't even go into the details, it would take too long. But also games like Heart of Crown, which is more a mechanical deck builder, not as thematic, but has really just taken the deck building mechanism and owned it down to a fine polish and used different bits and pieces from other deck builders together into just a really great, fantastic, mechanical, somewhat more abstract deck building game. It's just a deck building game at the peak of its class, in a sense. But I think I just love the idea of building a deck on the fly, of action efficiency, of getting those combos together, of choosing how your strategy is going to work, and building up your own particular deck out of all the many options, so that you can be playing a game with like 6 different players, but everyone's doing something a little bit different. That's how a good deck builder goes. Dominion might be dry, but that's an excellent example. Ascension, a little bit too random, still pretty good. The DC deck building game. Listen, I've done 2 different top 10 lists for this. You can go and check those out now. That's another reason why this had to be my number 1, because I can make an entire top 10 list just out of games that are devoted to this mechanism without breaking a sweat. That's how much I love deck building games. And the best part about them is that they're now starting to become integrated into larger games as one particular element, like City of Iron, that just gives it that much more flavor. So easily my number 1 best game mechanism, deck building. And that is it for the list. As I said before, if you didn't watch my intro though, tell me what you think down in the bottom comments. What are your best? What are your worst? Do you disagree with me? Are you on board with me? What did I leave out? Let me know. I had a lot of fun doing this list. Thank you so much for watching. Take care.